Welcome to the Sewing Machine Repair Guide. Today we're going to learn about how to fix when your thread keeps breaking on you or tearing or ripping. For some reason your thread is not making it. So let's see what we can do today to fix that. The first thing we're going to talk about is how to fix it in a drop-in bobbin type machine. Then we're going to talk about a different type of machine, one that has a vertical bobbin. Then we're going to learn how does this happen and how can I prevent it from happening again. And the last thing we're going to learn today is how to fix the problem. We're going to go through a lot in this video, so I'm going to get started. Learn with me. On this first type of machine, this is the drop-in bobbin machine, and this needle plate is the type of needle plate that it's a typical needle plate for one of these machines. And what happens when you're sewing is this needle is going to come down. The needle normally goes through this slot right in here. And if it's a straight stitch, it's going to go through the middle. If it's a zigzag, it's going to hit one side then the other and go like that. These other lines are where your feed dogs feed the fabric through, and your presser foot comes down on top. The feed dogs move the fabric. And then right here is where your bobbin would be. So a needle strike is where this needle comes down either in front of or behind this hole where it's supposed to go through. And if you look at this needle plate, you'll notice that we do have quite a few needle strikes on this plate. I mean, it's pretty bad. You can see that that needle was hitting right up here in the top quite a bit. This needle plate is a needle plate that I replaced for a customer. I actually bought a new one because I did not deem it salvageable because of all of these needle strikes here. This is a pretty bad example of needle strikes. So how does this cause my thread to rip? Well, when this needle is going down there, there's thread, right? The thread's coming through. If that thread brushes up against this, which it normally does while you're sewing, because the fabric moves. When the fabric moves and you have thread coming down through here, it's going to catch on all these little hard spots. And I don't know if you can hear this when I'm moving it. But those are all little sharp edges that are going to catch that fabric. And when it catches the fabric and your machine is trying to operate like it normally is, pulling the fabric tight, when that needle comes up, it is going to try and pull and rip that thread. The thread will be stuck here, your fabric's going to move, and then it's going to pull on that thread until something gives. And really, needle strikes cause more needle strikes because when that fabric is being, or when that thread is being pulled, your needle is now bending. So they cause even more of them because the needle's bending back or forward, and it's going to cause more strikes as you're going till that thread rips. And now we have to figure out what happened because my thread ripped. What caused my thread to rip? So let's say this isn't the problem. The next thing we want to do is we want to look here at our bobbin case. So for this drop-in type sewing machine, the bobbin case is the next thing we're going to look at. You want to look at this bobbin case very carefully, and you want to see if there's any frayed plastic where the needle has hit the bobbin case. In this case, this is a brand new one, so I don't have any needle strikes on it. But a needle strike will be a hole that has built up ridge around it of material, and it'll likely go all the way through. Not always, but likely it'll go all the way through. So we'll talk about fixing all of these a little bit later, but right now we're just looking for the problem. And for this one, these sharp edges here, they're the parts that get it the worst, because when this thing's rocking a little bit, those parts will be what's catching that thread, because the thread actually, when it comes down, the thread goes around this whole case each time you make a stitch. And if it's not smooth, that thread is going to catch on it, and we got to fix that. So this one's actually a relatively easy fix, so when we get into the fixing part of it, I'll show you that. But bobbin case. So for our drop-in bobbin, we have two things. The needle plate, and this one's pretty terrible, and the bobbin case. moving on. For our horizontal bobbin sewing machine, those also have a needle plate. The needle plate may look different. It may be smaller, rounder. It doesn't matter. It's all the same. You're looking for those holes. The other thing is, if there's nothing wrong with that needle plate, then what do I want to look at? Well, inside on your horizontal bobbin, you have something that looks like this. This part is called the shuttle hook race. It's called a race because on the inside here, this part is where your hook rides, and your hook actually rubs against this. So it's a part of it's really a part of a bearing surface, which is what's called a race. And in machinery and things like that, that part would be what the race is. So the thing that we're looking at on this one will be the top. This is where your needle goes through, this part right here. So your needle goes through there when this machine is operating, and it goes, and your thread goes around your bobbin that has, your bobbin case and your bobbin, which are on the hook right here. That thread goes around the hook, the bobbin, and everything, and then comes back up. This part right here is where you can have the problem of your needle strikes. And if you look right here, there's a little bit of a needle strike right there at the bottom on there. Just a little tiny needle strike, but that little needle strike is enough to cause problems. And I'll show you a really easy way to fix this. Now let's see how these needle strikes happen. First, as you're operating your machine normally, your needle goes down into the fabric, and then as the needle comes up, your feed dogs will come up and they will feed that fabric. So watch the fabric start to move, and then now the needle comes down into the fabric and comes back up, and then that fabric moves again. You can see that little hole where the needle was. There it goes, it's moving, and now we're down again. So what I see a lot of people do when they're sewing is you want to have your hand on here. So now you should have your hands on here to guide the fabric left and right to make sure you're making your straight stitches like you like. However, do not tug on that fabric. Tugging on the fabric is what is going to cause that needle. So as you see the needle coming down, if I'm holding on this fabric, look at that needle. Can you see that? Right here, that needle can bend backwards as I'm pulling on this. And it's going to cause that needle strike. If I'm pulling on this, it doesn't, see how the fabric slipped back and then the needle hits right there? So that's what you got to keep from happening. So don't pull on your fabric while you're sewing. All you're doing is guiding. In fact, it may be better to have just a couple of fingers on top like this. Whatever you got to do so that you're not actually trying to play tug of war with this machine, because that's what's going to cause those needle strikes on the plate. And like I said, this plate right here, this person definitely played some tug of war with that machine. Here I am. I've got needle strikes on my needle plate. My thread keeps breaking. I got to get this fixed because I've got masks that have to be out tomorrow. What can I do to fix this problem now? That's why you're watching my video. That's what we're going to solve here today. You don't have time to wait on Amazon to deliver your new needle plate or other parts that could be broken. Let's fix them ourselves. So here's what you need. A pair of scissors. I think you already have a pair of those. Some sandpaper. This, you may have to go to a hardware store. Walmart sells sandpaper. I mean, go somewhere where you can get it. This is 220 grit sandpaper. I really think that 220 all the way up to maybe 350, 400, somewhere in that range would work. Somewhere between those two numbers, 220 to 400-ish, somewhere in that range would work well for this. And what I want to do is I want to make sure that this is going to fit in that slot. So I'm going to cut strips. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to cut just a thin strip of sandpaper. Don't use your nice scissors for this because cutting sandpaper with scissors is probably the worst thing you can do for a pair of scissors. But anyway. Alright, I'm going to cut 2 strips. And we're going to see how this works. So there we go. 2 little strips of sandpaper. Pretty small. I didn't even measure. I just wanted to make sure that it fits into the hole that the needle goes into. Right on here. So our problem area is right in here where our needle goes on both sides. And what you do is you take your sandpaper, take the piece, thread it through there, and you're just going to do this. Now I know what you're saying right now. I don't have one of those fancy vise thingies. How do I do this? Well, I have done this without a vise before, holding it with my hand, kind of doing a three-fingered, hand thing, weird contortion, or you have a friend that holds it for you. It is possible to do. So you just keep doing this until that thing is smooth and feels smooth. Now, we got to do both sides. See how I'm moving it up and down as I go? Because this one was messed up all over. I'm getting my second one. I'm going to flip it around. You can see it from the back side. This side was much worse, if you remember. Now remember, I said that this was not fixable on this one. I did not fix this for the customer. This is something that, as a repair guy, I'm only going to sand this out if it's a small issue. Otherwise, it's much better to get the customer a brand new needle plate. But for you at home, this may be your only option. All right, let's take a look at what we've got so far. Now when you feel this, it feels smoother, but I've got a bunch of stuff on the surface too. And you can't let that go. That stuff that's on the surface has to be sanded as well. So we've got the inside where I was sanding nice and smooth in there. Now we got to work on the surface. Back to our scissors. Cut a piece a little bit thicker. So now I'm folding it over to get this little, it's just sandpaper. Let's get it to where you can see it. It's going to make it look ugly, but do you want ugly and working, or do you want pretty and not working? And I am sanding in the direction of where the fabric goes. Okay, made it really shiny compared to the rest of it. But as you can see there, those needle strikes now are divots. They're no longer protruding up. That one strike, that huge part, I don't know if you can see it. Yeah, you can see that. That huge piece in there that's missing, that's going to take a little bit more work. Hopefully yours is not that bad, because I can still feel that with my thumb catches on it. So that needle, that thread is going to catch on it as you sew. The rest of this is good. Now I'm not going to continue with this, but what I would do is I would take some more of these strips and I would sand, but I would sand on an angle and try and get the corner or the edge of this strip inside there to flatten it down. See how that's in there? That's what I would do at this point, is get that in there and try and flatten the two sides down of that gigantic divot and smooth it out. It's going to make this hole bigger, okay, which means your machine's not going to work exactly as good as it was, but it's going to work. It's just not going to be as great as it was. Again, the real fix for this is to replace it, which is what I did for this customer. But this is your, hey, I got to get sewing now fix. The next one we can look at is our shuttle hook race. This is the same thing. It's exactly the same thing. I'm going to take that sandpaper and I'm going to slide it in there. And I'm going to sand it, just like this. See how I can do this with one hand, kinda? And then, next one's our bobbin case. So for our bobbin case, this one is the one where you're going to take, if you have needle strikes, and they're typically, the ones that are going to mess with you are up here on this edge, or anywhere on the surface around the edges where the needle, where the thread would catch as it goes around here. That's where you can actually use this right here, your fingernail or your thumbnail or something, and you push that plastic back into place and you just push real hard. If this leading edge right here is really bad, that's when you would get the sandpaper and you could sand it down a little bit on the edge. But for the most part, any of those needle strikes where it's like a little hole, you just mold that plastic back into place with your thumb until it feels smooth when you move your finger over it. And when that feels smooth for your finger, it's going to feel smooth for that thread when the thread goes over it, and you'll be back in business. The only issue is when this thing, if it turns inside there and causes needle strikes, so it's turned where it shouldn't have turned, you got to check the parts that hold this in place, because it may need readjusted. And that's something that I'm not going to be able to show you here because it's different for every machine, and you may want to take your machine to a shop if that's the case. So just make sure when you put it back in, try and twist it. It shouldn't twist more than like a millimeter. Barely move. Thanks for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it helped you fix your sewing machine. If you'd like to support the channel and help me to be able to bring great content to you, you can look in the description below, and I've got a few things you can do there to help support the channel. Thanks for watching.